So this is a video of making a Mobius strip. So I need some yarn, which I've got lots of, and I need some circular needles. So I've got 2 circular needles here. Oops, this one is a Knit Pro circular needle, and this is an Adelino. The Adelinos are lovely because they're made for children and they have a shorter actual needle. If you compare the length of those needles, you can see that the Adelino's got a much smaller needle, and that means I can get a much tighter curl and actually be able to knit with it than I can with the longer needles. So the shorter needles, if you can get them, are really lovely for doing things with, but you can also do this with the longer needles. It's just that you have a much longer length before you can actually turn. So let's start making things. I'm going to use the Adelinos to do the knitting. I'm going to use the Knit Pros here to cast on. So to start with casting on, first of all, my yarn, I need to have about 1 metre that I just pull out. What I tend to do for 1 metre is just grab it at the end and pull as far as my arm can do it. Then that's about 1 metre. So this is my tail. Here is my tail. And this is my working yarn on the other side. So I'm going to hold it so that the tail is over here and the working yarn is over my thumb. I'm going to throw that yarn down on the floor so it's out of the way. That's my tail over there. That's the working yarn. And then if I bring in the needles, I'll hold those both together. And I'm going to be doing a Judy Becker cast on as sorted out by the Sockmatician. So I'm going to be going down there and turn around. And now I'm going to be putting the stitches on, always going from this side to that side. So the yarn that's the tail is going to be always going onto the bottom. Thinking of this top bottom that way as top bottom. So, oops, it's come off. I'm always going to be taking the yarn from the tail onto this needle and the yarn from the working yarn onto this needle. And I need 101 stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, hold on, I'm going that way, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, oops, 9, let's put those down, 10, 11, 12, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, and I want 101. So there we are, 101 stitches on there. And then this is the tail, and I want that tail to be twisted around. If I look on the back here, I want to twist the tail around, so holding the tail down on that, that's where I come from, holding tail down, and that's the way that I've been putting things on. So now I turn it around like that, so the top needle is still the top needle, and I pull the bottom needle out. Top needle is what I was putting all of the main working yarn on. Pull that one out. So now I've got stitches on the needle and more stitches on the, what's that called? The cord, I think. I'm taking my second needle, so this is my little Adelino, all totally separate here, And this is so that it's not quite so difficult to do things. If you actually have a second needle, then you haven't got to go around so many corners. So I think I'd like my yarn to be on that side. And now I just start doing all of the actual knitting from this needle here onto this needle, the second set. So I'm going to start, I always start when I'm doing my stitch with the knit, and I always, if I put it down, I make sure the next stitch would have been a knit, and that way I don't forget what I'm doing. So knitting, then purling, then knitting, then purling, all the way along this needle. Knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. Purl. Coming towards the end of the needle now. Knit. Oops. Purl. Knit. Purl. And my last one is a knit, which is right if I'm on the top needle. There we go. And now that needle is free, but notice that I've still got a whole load of stitches on the same set. So what I'm doing now is I want to start putting that onto the other end here. So I'm going to pull the first needle through, and basically the needle that we pulled out from the casting, we're actually going to push that back in. There we are. So now I'm going to pull that one out and just keep going over here. So it's this silver with this needle here. Let's get that that way. So I just want to pull that on there. So these two go together. This was the needle that has been doing all the work, and now going to this needle. So I'm now going to start there, which is a bit problematic for actually stop doing everything else. So let's just pull those ones over there. So what I did, the last one I did was a knit. So let's pull that up there. Oops, sorry, there we are. Just moving everything around, you can start seeing I'm getting something loopish. So now instead of a knit, I want a purl, because the last one was a knit. So in here is going to be a purl. And this is the only awkward bit, and that's because that's such a long needle. If it was two Adelina, it'd be easier. So that comes round to that side. Ignore all of the bits of cord everywhere, and just do a purl, because it's didn't knit, so now it's a purl. Now at this point I'm joining up things, so I'm going to make that be rather a tight stitch to just pull things. Now it's a knit. I'm going to pull that one as well. And then purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. But before I go on, I'm just going to do a few more. And we'll just have a look at what's happening there. So that was a purl. Let's push those around a bit to be able to reach. There we are. So the next one's a knit. I always prefer it to be the next one's a knit. Now, where that is joined is a bit of a hole, and you can see the tail. And this is joined with just a single piece of yarn. So, oops, here I've got another bit of contrasting, and I've got a hook, which I've got to put within handy distance. What I want to do is, because there's this gap bit here, as we go on knitting, you tend to find that that gets pulled. So to avoid that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this contrasting bit, if I can, through there, and on this side, any bit just roughly through there. I'm trying to just stop things stretching by tying bits up a bit. So, oops, whether you can see what I'm doing or not, I'm not quite sure. There. Where's the tail? So, that's the bit that's getting really spread out. And I've put a piece of, oops, you can't even see which bit's the spreading out bit. There's the bit that spreads out. There's only one bit of yarn there. I've put that piece of contrasting yarn either side on the stitches below it. And if I just tie a little knot in that, what that's going to mean is that as I'm stretching things all around here, I'm not pulling that bit of yarn, which is the connection between the sets of stitches. And that means it doesn't then become a little loop that gets stuck later on. So now I'm going to ignore that until I come back to it, and I can let that go when it's got a bit more secure. I'm just going to do moss stitch, knit purl, knit purl, knit purl, all around until this needle, this darker needle, falls off. And I'm ignoring all of the other bits and pieces that are all over the place. So I'm on a knit next. I'm going to stretch these stitches all around the loop to make it work. I'm going to go knitting and purling until the needle falls out, basically. So knit, purl, knit, purl. I can see I'm getting to the end now. Just 3 left. Knit, purl, and knit. And I'm finishing on a knit, though I started on a knit because there's an odd number of stitches. So there, now everything is on this looped set of needles, and my needles that I actually did the cast on are actually redundant. They can go to one side, and that just meant that by using 2 sets of needles I wasn't really having any difficulties doing it, whereas some Mobius ones are quite hard to actually get started. So what now? Well, now I just keep doing alternating knitting and purling. The last one was a knit, so the next one's going to be a purl. There's that first stitch there, so let's make sure I go into that. So it's a knit next. I've gone through there. Just push that up so I can get to it. And that's, I've actually pulled this one so tight, I may need to loosen it a bit. And notice that's not a slip knot, that is the actual stitch. This is the hardest stitch to do. There we go, got it. So if I do a knit through that, next one's a purl. Feel right? Yes, that feels right. Good. Oops. Look. Just come a cropper with it. There's nothing wrong. What's wrong? I know it's because I'm still behind. That's wanting to be a knit. This is going wrong. That should have been Why am I there? There should have been a knit. I think did I just do a purl? Yes, I just did a purl. Shame on me. That should have been a knit. Then a purl. When I'm doing this, the sort of, oh dear, have I gone wrong feel is, if you look at that, I don't know if you can see if I come closer and we can be in focus. I might be asking a bit much. Can you see a little tiny crossover there, but none there, a crossover there, but none there? Those ones are always going to be knits, those ones are always going to be purls. I don't know if you can actually see that. Basically, when you get to it, watch when are you knitting, when are you purling, and make sure it's always the same sort of stitch. I'm sure there's a proper way of actually describing it. What I'm just going to do now, though, is knit and purl and knit and purl and knit and purl and knit and purl all the way around until the whole thing feels as though it's wide enough for me and I'm happy. Here I am again, around very close to the beginning. I can see it's the beginning. I've taken my contrasting yarn out, but I can still see that there's the tail, so I can see I'm nearly back to the start. So let's just do a few more stitches and get right back to the start. So knit and a purl, and I think one more knit. And that looks as though I'm about the right sort of place. Maybe one more. Shall I do one more? I think I'll do one more. I don't know. There's the hole. You can certainly see where that hole is. That's my beginnings. So that hole I'm going to be actually getting rid of by using the tail. When I'm sewing the tail in, I'll try and hide that hole. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start casting off. I could make that as wide as I wanted to. At the moment, you can probably see that there's a bit more underneath that hole, I think, than there is on top, or maybe it is about the same, but you can just play with however big you want it. The other thing is that because it's a moss stitch, it's quite hard to see where the line of beginning is here, and that's the whole idea, because the moss stitch looks the same both sides, and so you're not seeing different things. It is quite fun doing one just in knit, and you can see how it divides the top and the bottom. I'm not sure what top means with a Mobius. Anyway, I'm going to cast off now. And I'm going to cast off just with a knit cast off, which is perfectly okay to do. So I'm just going to go knit, knit, stitch over, pulling that stitch, which doesn't want to come over the top. Come on, stitch. You want to really. Pulled it too tight. Just do it with my fingers. I've just made a stitch far too tight. There it is. Got him. That one over. Then I'll do all the rest much looser. That one. Oops, lost him. Over. Knit a stitch. Pull the previous stitch. Over. My thumbs might be in the way there. I hope you know all about these. Anyway, I'll just do one more, then jump to the end. So knit a stitch, and then stitch before is pulled over and off, and you get this happening. That's where it's finished, and that will get bigger and bigger. So now you can see I've got a hole and I've got a step. So that step I need to get rid of by, if I make that be a bit looser, that's going to be sewn in to that. So that will make that step disappear if I can make that be neat enough. I'm not going to attempt to do that on camera, but basically if you look at all of the pictures you've got there, you can see these little loops. And if you continue the loops, you can actually manage to make that step just about disappear. And the other thing is that I've got this to sew in, so I can use the fact that I've got that bit to sew in to actually fill in that hole there. So I can do that off camera, then show you the last bit. So with a bit of surreptitious sewing in, we end up with a moss stitch Mobius strip where you can't see a seam going from edge to edge because there isn't one. So with intrinsic curve.